today with final thoughts on leaving a legacy. Does anybody need any pens? Huh? Are you sitting in someone else's seat? We're going to charge you rent. I'll give you this. You recording? You recording? No. Anybody else need a text? I got more. All right. Now, remembering that this is the thought, the conclusion to this Bible study, everyone matters. Everyone makes a difference. That's Mark Sanborn makes that point here in his book. What can we say about this in the church? What relevance does that statement have for us? Okay? Doesn't pull together or work together, there'll be gaps and holes. Jesus actually some adiaphron doctrine in the church that we have to back from Jesus. Together, and when they're only, I think as we go on, because there's a question at the end of this that is critically important for the church to keep in mind. So the and skills and talents for them when we move forward. Right? So that's key. How can the application for this? I've said this for years, that the church, and I'm speaking to myself, but I'm also speaking to all of you together, the church has an obligation to help each other figure out their gifts. One of the things that is talked about in the book I'm reading this week is the passage I'm reading talks about what prompted him to get involved as a pastor is the same thing that prompted me to get involved as a pastor, was my pastor telling me that I should. And telling me that God has given me the gifts and talents to do. So it's that very thing. And so oftentimes it takes each other to point out to each other that you've been given a gift or a talent to be able to use in God's kingdom. So we need to make that application for God in the church. Then next, why do we shun the young children of the church from making a difference? Because this is a different question, but it's connected. You know, for ages in the church, we've looked down on young children and said, you got to get older, you got to grow up. Okay, that's a very valid point. There's impatience when it comes to guiding the young children of the church. But I also think in that same note, young children of the church need to listen to the guidance that they're given. And this is one of the things that my pastor used to tell me all the time. He used to say to me, I'll tell you the road to walk on, and it's up to you whether you walk on it or not. So... Well, I agree with you, Thelma. The one thing I would say to that is one of the unique things we have here is because we're a little bit on the smaller side, it stands out when the kids participate. You can go to a larger church and see the same thing. I was telling Noah that my father, before he passed, used to go and help with Easter breakfast. When you're serving 750, though, on a Sunday morning, you have to start a little bit earlier. So my dad used to get to church at 4 a.m., and they used to crack 120 dozen eggs. So I can promise you that was the one Sunday that I didn't beat my parents to church. But almost every other Sunday, I was there before them. So, it stands out in the smaller church because any of the kids that help, it stands out. And I also think we are a little bit unique here as a parish because our Constitution provides 16-year-old children, or young men and women, the ability to vote, which no other church in the Missouri Synod I know of has that provision in their Constitution. So I, as the pastor and most people here, have an expectation that our young people are going to participate. So yes, we are a little bit odd here. Yes, I saw a hand. Len? Yeah. I say that. Yeah, I agree. No, I agree. Yeah. Right. Yeah, let me clarify something when I say that, what I mean, because I agree with you. I agree with you. When I say that, I want people to understand that that's why I invest time in teaching them. Because there's a big difference to say that they are the church today and they'll be the church in the future. For me, the reason I say that they're the future leaders of the church is because one of the greatest things, I'm sure you've seen this over your life in the church, one of the greatest things that the church has are lay people who are educated and who understand both the scriptures and life together and are able to both articulate that as well as live it. And so when I say that, I'm talking about that's why I invest time in teaching them. And I think even as adults, if I was to give you the confirmation quiz today that I give the kids, the memorization stuff, most of you who've been trained in the church will, after a little bit of prompting, be able to recall all that stuff. But I'm telling you, the investment of time in that's what makes them the future of the church in my eyes. I absolutely, listen, if it wasn't for my pastor and certain lay people who said to me, get out in front at 18 years old in the church, I would have, So I agree with you. They are the present of the church, but they're also the future church because they will be the next generation. This isn't on the slides, but where do we lose the greatest number of people in the church, where they kind of walk away from the church? Yeah, but you're right, but don't use college as the reason, because the reason that they leave our church is because they're going to college. That doesn't mean they're leaving the church. Right. You're in between being young and being old. It's the same today, Jan. It's the same today. And then you hit 40 and wished you were back 30, right? I mean, that's, yeah. Well, but to that point, 20 to 30, I agree with you wholeheartedly. What's the normal events that cause people to come back to church? Children. And my father said this about my sister, because I used to get very angry with my sister. And he said, he put my dad was a man of few words, may his soul rest in peace, but he was absolutely serious when it came to the church and to faith. And he took my sister aside and he let her know in no uncertain terms, this is the way that I raised you, this is the way that you've been taught, and I expect you to live it. And she straightened up her act from that perspective. But it really happened when she had kids, because it all came flooding back to the fact that this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what my role as parent is to lead by example. And to this day, she is. And so, yeah, I saw another hand. Yeah. Right. Well, that's the church. Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's hard to get over, isn't it? Well, this is a great point, because many of us in this room were taught, and we taught our kids, you don't call adults by their first name. And I questioned my father when I was younger about this, and he got mad at me, But I said, if that's their name, why can't I call them that? Just stop being a big mouth, But it's true. It's true. And I even today, at 40 years old, when I go back to the seminary, or when I talk to my professor from college, who I consider to be one of my most influential people in life, I don't call him anything but Dr. J. I don't call him Jim. Even my coach, Dennis Twamy, you'll never, ever catch me calling him Dennis. No matter what he says to me, it'll always be Coach Twamy or Mr. Twamy. Never will I call him Dennis. And it also has to do with the fact that he demanded a certain level of respect from us. And he was old when I was young. I'm getting older. What does that make him? You see what I'm saying? I mean, seriously. I saw him as old when I was younger. And I respected that age difference then. Why is it any different now? Because he's getting older as I'm getting older. Well, it happens. But as a matter of course, they try not to. You're right. And that's one of the reasons. But even at the seminary, by the way, and I don't want to get into this because some people have very strong feelings, but I just bring it up. And that is that, I knew that fell off. This concept of calling a pastor by their first name, Pastor Rick, Pastor, or even just Rick. I'm torn on this whole issue because there is a defining difference between the office of a position someone holds, like, for instance, a police officer. If a police officer is in uniform, the correct way to address a police officer is Officer so-and-so, right? If you go to the hospital, even if you've had a family doctor for years, chances are you're going to address that physician as Dr. so-and-so. And so I struggle with that because half the crowd says it's a relationship thing. You shouldn't put a barrier between people and say pastor and all that. But the point I make there is when I'm with people by myself, I don't care what they call me. I really don't. But, when you're in a public place with other people have feelings about that, and you have to respect that. Well, Ralph Fisher told me the same thing. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, and Pastor Fisher told me that. When you become a pastor, you're going to lose your first name to become pastor. But my point is, I agree with you. With adults, I'm very torn on this because we teach our kids don't call adults by their first name, and yet half of me says that's silly. Because if that's their name, why don't you call them their name? You know what I mean? Go ahead. You didn't send me a royalty. Oh. Oh, that's even worse because that's a legal issue. Well, I appreciate it. And I don't tell them to call me that, but they call me that. They even put my nameplate, Dr. Hardy. And I did that on purpose when I ran because I want to differentiate myself from the church. I didn't want people to associate everything that I do is going to be, but by the way, everything I do is with the church. So. But I wanted to give them the illusion that I wouldn't do that, but just not true. Why is being neutral a bad thing? Why is being neutral a bad thing? Yeah. Yeah, God will see us. That's the direct point. Why else is being neutral in the church a bad thing? Yeah, nothing gets done. And to the next question, what does the Bible say about neutrality? It's very clear. Do not be blown by winds of change and doubt. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. I tell you the truth, and I keep telling you this, and I'll tell you this until the day I leave this parish or the day I stop doing this job, and that is the one thing you have that cannot be taken from you is your word. If you say yes to somebody, I will, do it. Because it's the one thing that God provides you with that allows you to have it not taken from you. You can give it up, and people give it up every day of the week and twice on Sundays. But your word matters. I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and they were you could tell they wanted to tell me whatever it was that they wanted to tell me. And you could just tell they got to the cusp at every time. And I finally realized, I'm a little bit slow, I get that. I finally realized that the information they were wanting to share with me was confidential. You could just tell by the way they were talking. And I said, I don't want you to tell me. I don't want you to break confidence. If I would have kept pushing that person, they would have broke confidence. But then I would have been just as guilty as them because they told me something that they told someone else that they wouldn't share. So when you tell somebody something, you should hold tight to that. You should hold tight. This thing is flying. I don't know why. There are only two choices in life, right? You either make a positive difference or you make a negative difference. What do you think? Is that true? You either make a positive difference or a negative difference. True or false? That's coming. But I would argue, and this is just me, that no difference is a negative difference. And it goes to the same theory that if you're not a part of the solution, you automatically become part of the problem. Why is it that most people tend to make a negative difference if they don't get their way? And this, my friends, is the church. This is the church. If people don't get what they want, they have three things they do. They make a ruckus and a stink and make a negative difference. They pout, or they simply leave. None of those are acceptable biblical ways of handling issues in the church. None of them. None of them. But what do you think to the question? And by the way, this negative difference that people make when they don't get their way is happening more and more and more and more in the church. And by the way, it's always the pastor that becomes a part of the middle of this. And why? Who said it was easy? Yeah, that's true. It's easy. Yeah, let me be clear about Jamison Hardy as the pastor of Peace Lutheran Church and that topic. If anybody those of you who have been in counseling with me, if family or marriage, know this. I use the same line. I hate you all equally. You get the point? My point is, I don't play favorites. I know there's a perception with some people. They create this perceived notion in their mind that I play favorites. But anybody who's been in leadership in this church with me knows that if you're in leadership, I by nature am going to do what with you that I don't do with everybody else. I'm going to have more conversation with you because you know that you've been a vice president, you've been an elder. And why? Because you're in leadership. By nature, I have to. I mean, Dave, you're a treasurer. We talk a lot more probably than we would if you weren't, because you are also here often, right? It's not that I don't want to reach out. It's the fact that it just by nature happens. It just happens that way. And it's not that I'm playing favorites. That's just not true at all. But when people don't get their way, and by the way, what's the problem with people wanting their way? What's the problem with people wanting it their way or no way? Okay, I wasn't thinking about that. They're not leaving any room for God. All right, but there's a bigger reason day to day practically. Well, yeah. I mean, we had 159 people in church last Sunday for Easter. If you want your way, you are forgetting that there's 158 other people in the church that have possibly have a different opinion. And the one thing I've been taught by many church men and women who have gone before me and are with the Lord now is that there's nothing wrong with standing and fighting for what you believe is the right thing or the right direction or the right way to go. But if the church has made a decision and moved forward, you should get on board. Not go with it necessarily. Just kind of go with it. Get on board, which means support it. And the problem in the church is what people will do day in and day out is if something happens that they don't like, they will fight against it until the church stops doing it. And I got to tell you something, I'm just as stubborn as the rest. What I mean by that is, and I've told many people this, there have been things, and you'll never know this unless I told you the specific ones, there are many things that the church has decided to do over my tenure as a pastor that it wasn't my necessary personal preference. But I do it because the church wants to go that way. Unless it's a non-biblical issue, then I tell you to stand and fight, put your feet in the ground, and do not give up until it's done. But I got to tell you something. I don't remember, well, some could argue that the merger could have been a biblical thing. I can't see that argument, but some could. Some could. In fact, if you watch the news this morning, there's a church is it Braddock, Paul? Is that where that is? There's a church in Braddock where these Catholics, the bishop is closing the church. And so what are these Catholics doing? They're deciding to take the Lutheran approach. I'm going to sit in the church until you get me my way, you know? And the police officer, that's it. The police chief of the community says, well, I'm not going to arrest these people unless you get a court order that they're trespassing, but I will do this. I'll take officers and block every entrance and make sure that nobody gives them any food or assistance to kind of, drive them out of there. This is the epitome of churchgoers, right? The guy even said on the news this morning, this is more than just a building. No, it's not. It's just a building, and God gathers where you people are, Not where the building is, but where you people are. And that's a tragic difference. So we got to get to that. Is it possible to make no difference? Think about that question. Is it possible to make no difference? You're right. No, you're right. You're right. But look at the question. Is it possible to make no difference? And think about that in terms of the church. And you've heard me say that no difference is co-equal to a negative input. So yes, I agree with you. But think about this clearly. Is it possible to make no difference? Well, yeah, but that's exactly, Thelma, what I'm talking about. This question is driven on that exact point. The people who simply show up at, let's just use our church times, at 10:25 and walk out at 11:30 and, are they making a difference? Yeah. Yeah, see, and this is... Well, and I struggle. That's a good point, Jan, because I struggle over that precise point. Well, I've been in this ministry here for 14 years, known most of the people who have been with me that whole time, and I won't say it publicly, but I can tell you certain families who for that whole 14 years have done nothing but show up and leave, and that's only when they do show up. So, again, I'm not saying that it is healthy for them to be here. Don't misunderstand the point here. The point has to do not with their personal faith life, but with the life of the church and with the life outside the church. Well, yeah, this is another issue. If you look at LCMS websites, and we don't have this problem here for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is I don't believe in it. But you look at a lot of congregational websites in the Missouri Synod, like you'll look up, St. Mark's Church in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, right? By the way, I don't even know if there is a St. Mark's in Tuscaloosa, but if there is, it's divine. But you look up their website, and they have 2,217 members. Then you look at their average, baptized. Then you look at their average weekly attendance, 47. I don't play that game. I don't play that game. Jan, I could not agree with you more. And the elders that are all sitting in this room, or those who have been elders in this room, who have worked with me for the last 14 years, we've done those things. And my point to you is, after we've done the work that we can do, answer the question, is it possible to make no difference? And the answer is yes. And it's a negative input instead of a positive input. And I'm not pointing this at you, but since you brought it up, I'm going to say this. So this is not Jan Simmons. But the biggest problem is most members have the idea, Jan, that, well, that's the pastor's job to go and find out why those people haven't been here. And what you in this parish need to know is the pastor is doing that along with the elders. But what you also need to know is you have the same exact obligation as the pastor does. This is not a paid staff issue, because, too many churches think, oh, that's the pastor's job. He gets paid to do that. No. This is a brother and sisterhood issue. This is a family of God issue. If your children, I'm going to stay on you, and I appreciate your boldness. And by the way, the apples were for you, right? But I'm going to appreciate your boldness because you have 3 children. You tell me, Jan, one of your boys or your daughter decide they're not going to come around for 2 years. How long are you going to wait before you go chase them? The point is, why do church members turn the other cheek when they haven't seen somebody for 6 months? And then they say to the pastor, well, how are the wards doing? I know. Why don't you go find out? Well, of course it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me. Good Lord, I had a conversation. I won't say who. You won't know this person. But I had a conversation this week with a long-time member who's a long time been gone. We had a great conversation. Great conversation. And I started laughing. I said, so is this as uncomfortable for you as it is for me? And they started laughing at me. And I said, well, that's the way I'm taking it too. It's just comical. Because there's no reason for you to be gone. And you know what they said to me? You're right. Yeah. I think two. Two people. Right, and that's the biggest problem. So the next question, what kind of difference are you making? Just think about that. Answer it if you'd like to, but think about it. What kind of difference are you making? Now, let me just be clear about this, because there are many people who are making a difference. Don't misunderstand that question. Many people in this church who are making a difference. But if you're not necessarily making a difference right now, look at that question. What kind of difference are you making? Mr. Foniak. Right. They're not acting like they would normally. Right. They are not conducting business like they would normally conduct business when they have a position in the play or whatever. Right. Anybody can act in a certain way, but when someone actually changes the way that they personally conduct business, as their Jamison, Marty, Brett, Funion, Sindasar, whatever, whoever you want to pick out of the group, okay? That so when you change that, something that you change now becomes the new normal. That's true. So what was abnormal before may become the new normal. Right. What kind of difference are you making? You may change something in your life, and I've witnessed this kind of recently, let's just say over the last 36 months. I've changed something in my life, and I've had people come up to me and say, oh, you're kind of different. And I tell people, you know what? This is what I've accepted as the new normal. So this is going to be, if you see that difference, this is my new way of conducting business. I'm not acting a certain way. It's you. That's temporary. Yeah. I'm conducting business a different way. It's a good point. It's a good point. You know, you see, what business are you making? Sometimes you make a difference because you change something which becomes your new normal, and you don't even realize that you're making that difference, but somebody on the sidelines sees it. Maybe either looking up or looking down on you, depending on if you're doing something positive or negative. Right. And they see that, and you're like, well, you're making like a bad difference or you're making a good difference. People either want to imitate or shun you for it. Well, you mind if I take it further? Because it's a great point, fantastic point. But I want to highlight something you just said. Who made the decision in that whole thing you're talking about for the last 36 months? You. Yeah, but that's the point. Right. You chose to do business differently, and praise God for that. And way to go, right? The biggest problem in the church is, that I see, is too many people want everybody else to change the way they do business, to conform, to make life comfortable for them. What you said and what you did was you changed business for yourself, which by nature, Sanborn says this, is going to make the world a better place for other people. So you should spend more time as brothers and sisters in Christ with that very point. Fantastic point. Because you chose to do business differently, and it's had a positive effect on pretty much everybody that you come in contact with. At least I'll say that. I don't know about you, but I'll say that. And I appreciate, it's a good point. Which is your leadership legacy in life? What is your leadership legacy in life, church, and family? Does it matter to you? I mean, many of you have heard what I want my legacy to be. Anybody remember what I said I want my legacy to be? The one thing that matters to me. The only thing really that matters to me about my legacy. Well, I believed what I taught. It wasn't something that I just told you about. I believed it, I lived it, and I taught what I believed. That's the only thing in life that I really care about people remembering me for. Now, that might sound silly. But why does it matter to me? Because when you're up here day in and day out, when you're teaching, when you're preaching, when you're leading, for me as a pastor, there's nothing you can say that matters more to me than it's something you really believe that you teach. And it really matters to me. Because I don't want the impression ever to be given that I just tell people that this is important. It is important, and I try to live it as important. But think about that. In your life, your church, and your family, what are some of the things that you want your leadership legacy to be? What do you think about that? What are some of the other things in here that people want to be known for in their legacy? The silence tells me that most of it's sinful. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. Don't get. He said that I was. Go ahead. Yeah, It's a good one. And that applies to life, church, and family. What else?
I've never really thought about what others might think about me because it doesn't really matter to me. All that shit matters is that when I get to heaven, God says, well done, good and faithful servant.
But, which I agree with the point, but, and look what the question is asking. This is not necessarily you concerned about what other people think. This is about what are you doing on a daily basis to leave a trail that you want people to think. I don't care what people think about me, believe me. But you should. No, you should. You should, though. You should for this reason. You should worry about it, not worry. You should concern yourself with it because everything that you do and say will be driven by what you want people to think about you as a legacy. And that's what I say to you. I want people to feel about me that, hey, he might have been loud, but he believed what he taught, and he lived what he taught. And so everything that I do is driven to try to leave that trail. It's kind of like an airplane that you see flying in the air. If they turn that switch on, and by the way, pilot, what is that switch that allows all that smoke to come out? Because not all planes, or is there a switch? That's just the vapor? Okay, well, thank you for that explanation because I never knew. I thought it was like a smoke screen thing that you hit a little button and here we go, here I am, But anyways, the point is, it doesn't matter what the plane is going in the right conditions, it's going to leave a trail. And so you might want to control what that trail is left, and you need to think about what you're doing to kind of control what that trail is leaving. Because, by the way, and I'm not, again, you just sparked my thought. I'm not talking about Cinda as a derogatory way here, but people who don't think about that don't concern themselves with what other people are seeing the trail behind them. And I would encourage you, based on this, and anybody else who feels that way, spend some time thinking about that because your behavior then might be conforming to more of whatever it is, as Kathy said, with hers, as to what she wants. I mean, some of the greatest servants in the church in my lifetime, when I've asked them, why do you work so hard in the church? People have said things to me like, because I want people to know that I appreciate what God has done for me, and it comes out in what they do for God. And so they're driven by what their leadership legacy is. And I want you to be driven by your, I don't care what it is, by the way, as long as it's God-centered. Go ahead.
Well, when we get to the part about and family, I remember when Paul and I were dating, and the first times we said, I love you to each other. And I made sure to tell him, I love you, but I love Jesus more. And that took a long time for Paul to kind of understand that Jesus was more important to me than him.
He's back there making faces. I got And avoid Paul. No, it's a good point. I mean, we could spend hours and days on the first things that happen in relationships, but that's a good one, right? It's a good one. Yeah, Jan.
Well, I know the LW now, and I try to do this too. It's like reaching the unreached to Christ, those that don't know the Lord, doing things that.
Right. And by the way, it doesn't have to be quote unquote intentional. Because most of the time, some of the greatest examples of faith come when you're just doing what God has called you to do and using the gifts God has given to you, right? And that's what you're talking about. Right. I'm not going to get into this deeply, but I've been working on with the leadership for this vision stuff for the church. I've been working on proposing to the church a new mission and vision. And one of the things spends more time about that, about disciples. Yeah, anybody else? All right. This is just on page 98 of your book or on page 96 of the other book. This is just a slide that kind of shows you the difference between people who are just building a resume and people who are leaving a legacy, right? Number one, what you accomplish, that's what people are putting on resumes. What you contribute, that's what people are doing for legacy. And then results, you should have that in both. The money you've made, that's the resume. Look, and by the way, if you want to turn me off in life, tell me how hard you work to earn all that you have in life. Because for me, that will just go in one ear and out the other, and it'll make me see you as a resume builder and not a legacy builder. Because the next one on the legacy side is, what's the difference you've made? You can make billions and make a huge difference, or you can make no money in life and make a big difference. And I'm more concerned about the difference you made than I am about the money you made. But on the other hand, some of the other books, some of the other policies I have in life, no money, no missions. But just keep that in mind. There's a delicate balance there. The impression you leave as compared to the impact you have. the impact you have. Some of the greatest impacts in my life, most of the people who have made those impacts, unfortunately, don't know. They don't know they've made those impacts. Whether I haven't told them, whether I don't have a relationship with them. I won't be here next Sunday, and I'm paying attention. If any of you are missing next Sunday, I'm going to mark that off as you taking advantage of the fact the pastor's not here. Oh, here we go. Now you're giving your exemption, right, Sue? I want to tell you now, Pastor, we're going to be going to commit. So that means next Sunday, all you gals, unacceptable. I'm calling Dave Steckholz canceling. But I'm going to be going to the Kentucky Derby. I got invited by my high school. Look here, Sue. I get at least one Sunday off a year where I don't have to work. You people can take it every Sunday, and just answer this. Yeah, right. You guys all gather. My wife tells me that conferences aren't working. They're just social gatherings when you get together and drink. Is that? Yeah. You were? Well, we're not talking about national gatherings. Listen, I go to every district convention we have, and let me tell you something. It takes a little bit of work to do them, but by and large, we get together, we talk. Most people, not me, most people drink. You know, there's nothing worse than a bunch of Lutherans who get together and trying to exercise their Christian freedom in a public place. My vicarage supervisor, I love him to death. But this guy used to see how many beer cans he could build outside of his hotel room to upset all the pietistic pastors in the district. And I was a vicar, and so I just sit there and watch the show, and I thought to myself, this is not right. But anyways, what was I saying? Oh, I'm going to be my best friend invited me to go to, my high school best friend invited me to go to the Kentucky Derby. This is a family I spent every waking moment with when I was in high school. His parents were like second parents to me. In fact, they put it in their will. They live in Michigan. They put it in their will that I'm going to do their funeral, which I told them they should be very careful when they get a church permanently that they talk to their pastor, because that doesn't sit well. I mean, if any of you have a special pastor, just let me know, because I would be ultra offended if someone dies and I've been their pastor for 15 years and their spouse or their kids go, hey, by the way, Dad wanted, Uncle Freddie, who's a pastor in Kansas, to come out and do, or Terry DiGiovanni, come on. I submit to that, right? But at least communicate that with me. So I tell them all the time, tell whoever your pastor is that you have that in your will, because it's really offensive. But anyways, so I haven't seen him for a while, and the impact you have. When I got ordained, I have two guys I went to high school with that we were like inseparable. The other guy lives his life, God doesn't matter. He's one of these lapsed Catholic types, drinks like a fish, runs through women like he's jogging. And I'm trying to be honest. It's sad, and I tell him this. Well, anyways, when I got ordained, he came up to me and he said, you're the one person in life that I've known who has set a course, who has been dedicated to the Lord, and who has not deviated. And he said to me, I want you to know I admire you for that. And I said, then why don't you listen to me? Stop drinking and stop running through women. This was right at the church. He gave me a big hug and said, thanks for the advice. Oh, wait. I still love him, but I worry about him all the time. Your organization, family, and community is a part of your legacy, and a part of your resume is your career, what you've accomplished, the positions you've had. And then lastly, self-improvement as compared to helping others to improve. Remember what Sanborn says early on in this book. He says, when you help others to do better and be better, by nature you are making life better for yourself. So that investment of time is not a bad deal, folks. That's why I tell with this friend I'm telling you about. I try to invest time over the course of years. I send him little notes here and there because hopefully that has an impact on him. Leading a leadership legacy is not always going to be fun and exciting. In fact, it will often be painful. What can be done to deal with the painful side of leadership? And by the way, before you answer, that book, Kathy just happened to find that slide on that book. That book is an instrumental book that I've used in my dissertation. That book is a book that I had my class read for a seminary for pastoral leadership. Anybody who's in leadership would benefit from this book. It is phenomenal because what it tells you, kind of in a condensed way, is being in leadership means you're going to have problems. People are going to hate you. They're going to talk about you. They're going to, make you the source of their problems. And being a good leader means that's always going to happen. It's not going to change who you are. But answer the question. What can be done to deal with the painful side of leadership? In the church, or in your profession, or in your life. Marriage, family, whatever. What do you think? I think it's a good point. Pray. But it cannot be the end all, because then God will answer your prayer in some way and tell you, as my grandfather told me on many occasions, tie your boots tight and go out and get to work. Because part of being a leader is you're going to get knocked down. Believe me, many days happen where I get knocked down. But the true mark of being a good leader is, and that's one of the reasons I give thanks to God that he let me be an athlete, because, especially wrestling, because you get beat and it's you and nobody else. At least in football, I could blame the other 10 people, you know. But in wrestling, you can't blame anybody. When you win, it was you. When you lost, it was you, and there's nobody else to blame. So yeah, what else? What else can be done to deal with the painful side of leadership? Yeah. In the church, and I forget, somebody asked me this recently. Well, maybe it was you, Brett. Pastors. Who do pastors? Hey, you guys talk to me. You know, you come talk to me when you have problems, when you got issues, when you're stressed out, when you have family problems, when kids are, you know. Who do I go to? Who does the pastor go to? Well, no, in fact, you know, let me just say this about my wife, and she can tell you this, and it's been this way from day one. She doesn't know virtually anything that goes on in my pastoral life, and I do that on purpose. Ask her what happened the first day I was ordained. I had a young gal in the church come to me and tell me she was pregnant, and 6 months later, you could start to tell that she was pregnant, and she went to Wendy, and Wendy didn't know that she was pregnant, and the gal said to her, "Didn't your husband tell you that I was pregnant?" And the answer was, no. Even things that people say to me, "Oh, you can tell your wife," I don't tell her, because I don't get in the habit of picking and choosing the things that I can tell her in my ministry, because there are certain things I just can't talk about, and there are certain things I don't talk about. And, you know, part of being a leader is you try to keep your family out of the fray. It's a fact. Yeah.
Even in politics, when they say somebody has a huge victory, it's not 52 to 48.
Yeah. Well, believe me, and the same thing goes in the church. Bishop Steckholtz won his election, this would be 8 years ago now, by one vote. One vote, 126 to 125, I think it was. And you know the ironic part about it is there was an Oriental couple that was from New Jersey in one of our churches that were the voting delegates of their church out there. I think they were Korean, actually. And they came in, and the clock was going 7, 6, and they ran over and got their voter, and both of them voted for Dave Steckholtz. The last 6 seconds, those two votes, because it was only one vote, but it was 2 votes, because the second vote, one vote would have tied it, right? And by the way, if you only have 2 candidates and you have a tie vote, do you know how parliamentarily you have to deal with that? What's that? Oh, well, yeah. Well, believe me, Dave, the fact that the vote is tied, it is a fire. Because the real parliamentary way to do that is to continue to vote in the same fashion until someone changes their vote. When you have an assembly with 2 people who have exactly the same number of votes, and assuming you have the total number of voters. So if you have 240 votes and the vote is 120 to 120, assume that's the case. Because oftentimes 1, 2, 5, 6 people don't vote on any given vote. So if you go to the LWML convention and you do your vote and there's 60 votes possible and you have 30 to 30, the parliamentary way to handle that is to continue to vote until one person changes their vote. Think about that. I mean, just think about that for a second. That's a problem. But there's only one way to do it, because to get a true majority. And in Dave Steckholtz's case, he won by 1 vote. And the man who lost to him by 1 vote today is the chairman of the board of directors. And they've been together. They came into the church at the same time. This guy, by the way, who lost to him is a phenomenal pastor, Pastor John Steve. This guy is, I tell you what, I don't know if I could do what he does. If I lost by 1 vote to a guy and he became, I don't know. It would be hard for me, but that's because I'm sinful. What can be done to deal with the painful side? What else?
Now, if we all look at that picture up there, there's a target where the image of the face should be. Most people don't look at people's bodies, or they look at your face, because they're going to know you by your face.
You got it, Brett.
Guys, long arms, or big feet.
You figured it out.
They're going to know you by your face. So that face right there has a target on it. And sometimes that target, I don't want you to be my leader, but I don't want to be the leader.
Of course.
You know what I mean? You have to, that's very important to see up there, but the higher your leadership is, kind of the bigger that target gets. That target could expand
You got that right. Yeah, believe me. The difference between the target that's on my face like that and the target that's on Matt Harrison's body as the president of Senate is a big difference. And so, understand this. Anybody who seeks leadership is seeking, self-punishment. I mean, seriously, what it amounts to.
But in this nomination process that we're going to be going through soon, you may be asked to step up and take a leadership, of any of the offices that are becoming available to the people that are going to be asked, or people that are nominated.
Yeah, they should already been asked because today was the day we're supposed to present it, but go ahead.
Okay, well, don't look at that as being a target. It should be more of a challenge. Actually become an effective leader.
Yeah, you're right, Brett. I probably shouldn't have shown this slide before we go through the nomination process, but no, you're a good point. No, it's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. It's a good point. Leadership is about creating hope in people. By helping to create hope, people are motivated to go and do. What can you do to create hope? What can you do? You, personally. What can you do to help create hope? What do you think? What can you do to help create hope? Well, I think the word hope is very broad here. Other people, God, themselves. I mean, you can fill it in however you want. Because hope for people. I mean, look, let's just get down to brass tacks. People do not want to participate in anything where they don't feel like they're valued. Or they don't feel like they're making a contribution. Or they don't feel like there's production that comes out of it. I mean, one of the appeals to megachurch ministry, one of the big appeals to being in a megachurch, is there's a perception that there's a lot of things being done. And there are a lot of things being done. There's programs, there's this, there's that. But what a lot of people forget about having a congregation who has a lot of things going on is there's a lot of people doing a lot of things. Small congregations always, and by the way, I can give you 15 examples of congregations who have called me to quote unquote interview me or whatever. And every single one of them to a T, if they've been smaller, has always made the questions out to, what can you do to make our church grow? What's the faulty understanding there? Well, yes, that's true, but there's also a faulty understanding inherently in that question. Right. Every congregation I've ever been involved with or known about or talked to that was smaller by nature has the understanding and the impression that all we need is this kind of a pastor and they'll make our church grow. In fact, one congregation, and I'll tell you, the call that I got, was it last December, that one to Arkansas? That church in Arkansas? When they called me originally to talk to me about the interview process, they said that to me. And I said, well, I'm not the guy you want. I said, because I'll hold you to the fire about you. And they said, okay, then they didn't call me. They called another one of my friends, by the way, because he told me that they called him. And I just started laughing because I thought to myself, these people don't want a pastor. They want a caregiver that's going to do all the work for them. When they called me, and Kathy knows this because the way that the whole thing went down, I said to her when I got the call documents, I wasn't going to take the call, but the fact that they sent a letter to this church asking to have me released to that church, assuming that because they called me that I was leaving, just made me angry. Because these were people, and I guarantee you, these are people who have the idea that all we need is a pastor who is energetic and he will, you've just fill in the blank. That's such a faulty understanding of ministry, and any congregation who feels that way, look at every mega church around here, look at every big church in the Missouri Synod. They have a huge cohort of people, lay people, who are out there doing it. Down in Atlanta, Georgia, at one of our churches in Atlanta that I was at, they have about 750 on a Sunday, and they have 10 different Bible classes that go on. They have 3 services. So they have 8 o'clock, 9:30, and 11. And during the 9 o'clock service, or 9:30, whatever time it was, they have 10 Bible studies going on with 10 different lay leaders. I would love to have 3 services, that I'm in the church doing 3 services while I have 10 lay people out teaching Bible class. I would love it. Love it. But again, people want the activity, but they don't want to be a part of the work. Just know this, we're not there yet in the vision process, but one of the things I'm going to be asking for in the next couple months is I'm going to ask for 5 individuals and or couples. It doesn't matter whether you're an individual or a couple. And I'm going to ask those 5 individuals or couples to take on 5 other families, whether they're inside the church or outside the church. And I'm going to ask them to meet regularly as a small group and develop a small group with them, leading that small group. And the group can decide how frequently they meet, weekly, twice a month, 3 times a month, once a month. I don't really care. But I'm going to go through training those folks, and then I'm going to place the responsibility of those groups on those people. The success or the failure is not going to be on Pastor Hardy. It's going to be on the 5 leaders. And so if you have an idea of being one of those 5 leaders, come talk to me. If you're willing to put in the energy and the effort, come talk to me. Because at the end of the day, the church will only grow as far and as wide as the people of God are willing to take the message out. You really think a guy like Joel Osteen, and I hate the fact that I'm even using him as an example, but I can tell you why I'm using him. There was a big news story this week about him. I don't know if you saw it. There was fraudulent activity in his church. The financial secretary was stealing the offering. You know how much they get in every week? Anybody have an idea? Over $500,000 in offering every week. And so the article was about, this is opening people's eyes to how much money that ministry actually generates. But do you think that a guy like Joel Osteen, who sees 30,000 people on a Sunday, you think he makes one home visit? The answer is absolutely not. He spends his whole week preparing for, and then, by the way, during the week, he goes and does all of his guest appearances and gets paid for it. But you said it. Say it again. The show. Because real pastoral care means you deal with people where they're at, which means in their home, in the hospital, in the nursing home. I got an email from Evelyn Molatoris about Easter week services on the computer. Evelyn said to me, Pastor, the production, and she called it production, was fantastic. It was packed. In the words of my husband, it was loaded. She said, and it was so wonderful to be able to sit here in my room in Concordia and worship with my people at Peace Lutheran Church. She said, the only difference between now and when I was sitting in the pew is I can't nudge John and wake him up. Mental and spiritual toughness are characteristics of those who lead in church. With this in mind, how can you support the leaders of the church? Mr. Fournier.
I hate to be the one speaking up here all the time. We'll go back to one. Yeah. Can you open
Oh, I don't need it. I got it memorized. Go ahead.
okay, page 192.
All right. Divine Service 4.
The offer tool.
Go ahead.
That right there. If anyone wants to open their
Let me guess. We give thee but thine own, whatever the gift may be.
created in me
Well, yeah, okay. That's the TLH page 5. Yeah. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me.
to create hope. Create in me a clean heart, O
Yeah.
God, and renew a right
Spirit within me. Yeah. Cast me not away from thy, and take not thy.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, that right there.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Use that as like a prayer to guide you through some of the rough situations and some of the leaderships or just how you want to conduct business.
Good point.
Just unconsciously or subconsciously, whatever the word is, I want to use that as the proper word.
Good point.
That's the way you conduct business. And people will see that and you won't have to put on any shit.
Right.
You use that as a new norm and the way you want to start conducting business in just a way that is satisfying to God and putting God first.
All right.
And whatever people want to say or think about you or
Doesn't matter. Right.
condemn you for or praise you for, that makes
No difference.
because you knew what you put first.
It's a good point. Good point. With that in mind, how can you support the leaders of the church? What do you think? How do you support leadership in the church if you're not already a leader? How do you support it? Encourage? How else? Yeah, that's right. Good point. Help if they ask you to help. Well, yeah. Go and ask. Right. I'll tell you a little simple one, and it happens to me. So I don't want to give the impression it doesn't. And I don't necessarily need it on a regular basis, but just the kind word that you're doing a good job once in a while. I was visiting one of our members in the hospital here recently, and they said that to me. And they said, and anybody who tells you you're not, tell them, and I can't use the language, just because you're related to him, Sue, doesn't mean you can. That's why I'm not giving you the ending, because it was explicit, right? So, yeah, it was Gene. Gene, by the way, Gene was in the hospital this week with some heart issues. And it's one of the reasons we're going to be getting an AED machine here. Again, we got things going on. Leave a legacy. This is from Deuteronomy. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore, choose life, that you and your offspring may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying his voice, and holding fast to him. For he is your life and length of days, that you may dwell in the land of the Lord, swore to your father, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give them. What do you want your legacy to be? Think about that. What do you want your legacy to be? Because whatever it is you want your legacy to be, everything that you say and do should be driven by knowing the trail that you're leaving behind, like the jet. Knowing that whether you like it or not, there's a trail being left. Whether you're good or bad, indifferent, active, supportive, unsupportive, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is in life, you're leaving a trail. What do you want that legacy to be? What do you want that trail to be? You know, when people die, it's a lot easier to say good things about them, right? It is. Because you tend to forget the bad things when people die, and you only remember the good things. You know, and I'll think about my grandfather for a second. My grandfather was an alcoholic for a lot of his life. I never knew him that way. But he was, to my father's recollection and my grandmother's recollection, you know, there'd be many a days where he'd go and get paid for his job, and he'd go to the bar and drink it all away. But as a young boy, I knew nothing but my grandfather as loving and supporting of me. He never missed an event. That man and my grandmother drove all over this country to watch me participate. They came out to Montana to watch me wrestle in the national finals. I knew nothing of my grandfather than the quote-unquote good stuff, right? But the fact is, the one thing that I'll talk about my grandfather and my father, and it's the only thing really that I care about, is they left one thing for me. And the only thing that matters to me is a legacy of faith. A dedicated life serving the Lord and loving the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind. And nothing else matters. Nothing. And I can proudly say, my father before me, his father before him, and his father before him, great-great-grandpa Hardy. And I can say that. And that's the legacy that they left. Not even probably trying to do it, by the way, as a conscious thing. But they've left it for me, my brother, my sister, my 6 cousins, to my kid. It's a legacy that goes on. And it's a legacy that you should pay attention to, because nothing else matters. It doesn't matter how much money you leave your kids. It doesn't matter how, none of that stuff matters. But what does matter is the example of faith that you give. It does matter the confession you have. And it does matter, because if you confess God before men, he will confess you before his Father who is in heaven. Lastly, leadership isn't a mysterious art practiced by only a select few. It is a daily response of every man and woman who wish to make a positive difference in the world and make a little better place as a result of their efforts. Fantastic quote by Mark Sanborn. Any prayer requests? Comments? Concerns? Oh, hang on. I'm good. I'm not that good. Go ahead. Yes, Peggy's father-in-law passed away.
I have 3. One is for Jeff and Laura, who lost their son. And then also for Jenna, she had an interview for a job she really liked. So I would, if it's the right job for her, that procedure. And then also for the LWNO convention, that one, the women who are traveling, and also that the God bless it, that it's not just a social event.
No, I'm just laughing, Jan, because I'm just, whenever, well, we don't have time to get into this, but I actually disagree with that, because it's the same social event that well, that's it. it does need to be a social event because you are building a bond of brotherhood and sisterhood. And yes, I agree. Take the stuff and go use it. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we give thanks this day by your gracious mercy, your kindness and love to all people. We ask you to bless the work of our hands, the meditations of our hearts that may glorify you this day. Be with your children this day as we call upon you in our hearts for these people, for Sharon, Barbara, Margaret, Paul, Craig, Leo, Stacy, Brian, Jean, Susan, Sandy, and Virginia. We ask you to bless, guide, lead, and strengthen these, your people, with the care and protection you bestow on your people and the love that you show to all people. Be with Peggy's family and all those who mourn Bob's loss, as well as with Jeff and Laura at the loss of their son. Send the Holy Spirit to give them peace and comfort, health and protection, to know that you will not leave or forsake your people. Guide your people this day, Lord God, in their way. Be with Jenna and all those seeking employment, that you would shine down your bright beams of light upon them and give them the ability to be employed in a way that is both pleasing to them and effective in their talent use that you give them. Be with the LWML convention as it is approaching, with all the gals and folks that are going to that. Help them be safe, bring them safely to the place where they are going, and return them safely to their place of rest. Above all else, O Lord, though, we ask that you use the convention to motivate your people to go and to serve, to take the love that is shown to them and to show it to others who have the need for hearing the gospel of Jesus Christ, both now and forever. We give thanks for the service of all the gals who work in LWML and for the ministry that they have, both now and forever, as we come before you this day as your dear children and give thanks and pray. Amen.